So what am I doing here? Okay. I just thought, rather than talking about a great picture for the future of the city, I share with my colleagues here some of the memories of the past, and more important, because you know what? We don't necessarily agree politically throughout this room on individual projects, one way or the other, but I think probably what brings everybody together here is we share some values. And the values I wanted to talk about today were the ones that we talked about at Dunbar 2 or 3 weeks ago when Jonathan and I and May Brown were there. I talked about democracy, I talked about accountability, and I talked about transparency in government processes. So we can agree on that. You know what? I don't agree with the rapid transit along Broadway, period. I just don't. But you might. I just think that it's a terrible travesty, like a golf course, or like it's not the ski hill or the golf course that's important here. It's the development privileges that go on, the upzonings that go on, and we're never, I'm on a rant now. You're not going to see Broadway the way it is. Parthenon's not going to be across the street. You're going to see Banana Republic and more big London drugs, but never mind. We might not agree on that, but we do agree that there are some processes and some values that should be preserved in our city. And I'm going to start from there. I believe too in the zoning bylaw. I think the zoning bylaw 3575 is 95% of what a city council has to do, what they have to protect and what they have to steward. What they are stewards of is the freaking zoning bylaw. And you carry that around as a councillor and you read it before you go to bed, and you know that zoning bylaw, and you know that it's your social contract with the citizens of the city. And you don't go around having dinner with the developers the night before a public hearing. So I'm here because I have serious reservations about our council expressing its predilection for supporting higher densities. It's being called an interim zoning, which at best is laughable, and at worst it's legally ambiguous. It's being done in a broad brush, one-size-fits-all manner across the whole city without a vestige of neighborhood consultation. It cloaks itself in the language of housing affordability, but shows no clear idea of how to actually create and enforce private contracts with developers about tenancies. And it has absolutely no definition of affordability. Thank you, Linda, for making me say this. And it went viral, and that's why I'm here. But that's...
You're welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I want to draw up first a picture between the differences between the traditional ways of civic governance and what's happening right now. Vancouverism is the term that we coined, or we didn't coin it, but the media did, to talk about a system of land use planning that Vancouver's become famous for. Spaxman and Beasley and McAfee are the names associated with it, and Team, of course, is the political party associated with it. The system was built around a long-term plan with public input at every stage. On the ground, planners were given latitude and discretion. Jonathan didn't believe in the discretionary land use plan, but we sorted that out at Dunbar, didn't we?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, he leaves. So we agreed on applications that met benchmarks that were set by communities and council. View corridors, green space, urban design were built in as strong values like density bonusing and social and cultural amenity. They were all built into the bylaws. Cultural amenity charges, community amenity charges were in fact for communities, okay? How many communities have seen a community amenity charge? How many communities, Adrian's been asking questions at council, how many communities have actually seen a community amenity charge coming back to the community?
No.
They've become invisible. Insofar it was possible under local area planning approach, communities did have a chance to formulate their land use and their transportation requirements. They even discussed housing needs. Look at Strathcona, which established its own building society and built hundreds of units of co-op housing and social housing in the 70s. Processes for building social housing were clear and the funders were publicly accountable, largely because they were government or government funded. Of course, the 60s and 70s were different from what we have today. Jonathan and Margarita pointed to that, so I shouldn't glamorize them or pretend they can be relived. My political views are a product of that age when the federal government made money available for social housing, when public ownership and publicly accountable regulation determined who would reap the benefits, when it was easier to talk about accountability and democracy since there was a government in Ottawa that believed in government. The reform movement called TEAM was a coalition of development interests, design professionals, university planning, engineering, social work, geography departments, and neighborhood activists. And this room would have been tripled in the 60s when neighborhood activists got together. And a lot of you here, I recognize you, we were all there, weren't we? Talking about local area planning, citizen resource boards, planning social services, housing needs. We were planning. We were spurred on, as Jonathan talked about, by an intensely interested media and a federal Department of Municipal Affairs, headed by and deputied by Westerners Ron Basford and Peter Oberlander. So we had Ottawa working for us. It was a brief, halcyon period when Vancouverites could wake up in the morning knowing that they were being treated like Toronto and Montreal.